Well, good morning and welcome to Christ.Church. It's so good to see you here today. Welcome if you're new around here. My name's Jason. I'm one of the pastors here on staff, and I get the thrill, the privilege every week of being able to teach you from God's Word. And so let's get to it today. We are in Genesis chapter 31. Genesis chapter 31, and here's what I've got to do today. I've got to cover 87 verses today. That's right, so maybe by kickoff we'll be done, all right? So now let's jump in because we've been looking at the book of Genesis for the better part of this year. And so if you're visiting with us, you're a guest with us, over the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at the lives of a couple of the patriarchs. We started back in spring with Abraham, and then we started in with Isaac, and now we've been looking at this man by the name of Jacob. And we've learned by this point what Jacob means. Jacob is a trickster. He's a heel grabber. This is a guy who's always working the angle, always playing the con, always about himself. But what we've been watching throughout his entire life is God taking him through this process of breaking, taking him through this process of transformation. And so we remember back at the very moment, he had this moment of awareness where he stole his brother's birthright in the blessing, and then he ran for his life. And he has this encounter with God where he has to finally look at himself in the mirror and go, man, is this all that life is? And he recognizes that there's more to life than what he's been doing and how he has been living. And so he then takes a step into this second part of this transformation process, which is the resistance phase, where he has this if-then conversation with God. He says, God, if you do this, then I'll do this. God, if you do this, then I'll do this. And it's this back and forth, give and take thing that he does, because here's what he wants. He wants to change. He wants to be transformed. He's just not there yet, because he's experiencing what you and I experience. Those old habits in us, they die hard. And so what we see Jacob doing last week is going back to Jacob's dark side, the trickster side. He decides, you know what, I'm gonna get mine no matter what my father-in-law says. And so he puts together this devious plan to kind of breed the spotted goats and the spotted lambs so he can accumulate more and his father-in-law can get less. And what we see is that he's been living under this rule of his father-in-law. Jacob is beginning a taste of his own medicine for the past 14 years. And so today what we're going to see finally in Jacob is deep change. And so on the count of three, let's say those two words together, deep change. 1, 2, 3. He is going to experience deep change. God is going to lead him to this place of breaking. Because here's what God has been to Jacob most of his life. God has basically been a genie in a bottle. Basically, whenever Jacob needs something, he kind of rubs that lamp, rubs that bottle, out pops God. Hey, God, grant my wish, and then when you're done, get back in the bottle. And God's not going to let Jacob get away with that. And so what we've seen is the circumstances. We've seen that 14 years working for his father-in-law, another 6 years, so 20 years. He's been getting a taste of his own medicine from his father-in-law, Laban. And so here's what we're going to find today. This trickster, this heel grabber, this deceiver, this shady guy, this guy who's always working the con, he's gonna find himself in a position doing something that he's never done before. He is finally going to have to submit. In fact, on the count of three, let's just say that word together, submit. 1, 2, 3. And so God is going to gently lead him to this place of brokenness so that he can make Jacob into who he always knew Jacob could be. And so let's jump in. We've got a long way to go today. I want to get done before the kickoff. Verse 1 here is, I'm kidding that, all right? We won't be here that long. So verse 1 says this, but Jacob soon learned that Laban's sons were grumbling about him. Jacob has robbed our father of everything, they said. He's gained all his wealth at our father's expense. And Jacob began to notice a change in Laban's attitude towards him. Now, there's never been issues in your family about money, right? Everybody laughs and giggles. Like, of course, there always seems to be. And every family seems to run into a point somewhere along the way where there's money issues. And so that's what's happening here in this family. Not only are there all the other dynamics going on here, but now there's money issues. As Jacob's plan for these spotted calves, these spotted ewes, these spotted lambs, it's working. And so his wealth and his animals are starting to outnumber his father-in-law's. And so his brother-in-laws are looking around going, hey, you know what this means? I'm not gonna get as much of an inheritance as he is. And so money problems start to rise up, which leads Jacob to recognize something about Laban. He's not looking at him the same way he used to. And so verse 3, God steps in. It says this in verse 3, then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your father and grandfather and to your relatives there, and I will be with you. And so basically he says, you know that promise I made to your grandpa Abraham, to your dad Isaac, I'm continuing to make that promise to you. I promised you land. I promised you a promised land. And so I need you to go home. I need you to go back to that land that I promised to your grandpa, to your dad, and now once again, I am promising to you. And so what we're gonna see here in the next dozen verses is he goes back and he tells his wives what God had said to him. And if you're new around here, you're going, hold on a second. Did he just say wives, plural? That's right, because of several poor decisions Jacob made and because he had a shady father-in-law in Laban, he's got multiple wives. He married Leah, and then he also married her sister Rachel. Then he also's got 2 handmaids, one of each. And so he's got this whole house full of women that he's caring for at this point. All of them are having his children. And so he comes back and he tells them the news. And I want you to see their response to him telling them it's time to go. Verse 14, Rachel and Leah responded, that's fine with us. Let's get out of here. We won't inherit any of our father's wealth anyway. He has reduced our rights to those of foreign women. And after he sold us, he wasted the money you paid him for us. They're like, let's go. Who cares? Because remember how long he worked for both of these women? 7 years for Leah, 7 years for Rachel, and that was like a dowry. And so some of that money was supposed to not just go to the family, some of that money was also supposed to go to the girls. And so here they're going, well, dad took that money and never gave a penny to us. We don't know what he did. Maybe he invested in Bitcoin. Maybe he bought some property in southern Georgia in a swamp. Maybe he bet on Alabama. I don't know what he did. Yeah, sorry about that, Alabama fans, but you know, we love you. It's a long season. But whatever he did, he lost our money. And so you know what? Let's leave. And so everyone's waking up to the reality here. Jacob sees it, the women see it, and now God is seeing it as well. But Jacob, he can't help being Jacob. He's like, man, this guy's never going to learn. And so Jacob once again reverts to his shady side, and look what he does in verse 20. So Jacob outwitted Laban the Aramean, for they set out secretly and never told Laban they were leaving. And so there's this constant chess match that's going on here between Jacob and Laban. Who is the bigger deceiver? Who's got the bigger plan? It's just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so what does he do? He gathers up his wives, his kids, his servants, all of his animals, and in the middle of the night, he leaves. That's no way to leave home. I mean, it's no way to leave home. No matter what might be going on, you don't pack up all your stuff. You don't sneak out in the middle of the night. But that's exactly what he does. And Laban doesn't realize it. In fact, Laban's so busy, the Bible says, over shearing his sheep, it takes 3 days for him to recognize that Jacob and his daughters and his grandkids and all their flocks, that they're all gone. But here's what happens to make matters worse. Rachel decides to do something. Rachel decides to take something that's not hers, which sets up a huge altercation. Verse 19 says this, at the time they left, Laban was some distance away, shearing his sheep. Rachel stole her father's household idols and took them with her. Now, the Bible doesn't say why she did this. I mean, we can only surmise maybe she's trying to get back at dad. Maybe this is her way of sticking it to dad on the way out the door. Or maybe she always felt that dad cared for these idols more than he cared for them. Or maybe these idols were valuable. And she's like, you know what, if I'm not getting paid, I'm gonna take these and I'm gonna pawn them so I can get some money. Or maybe, we don't know, maybe she's not all in with Jacob's God. And she's just kind of hedging her bet. But she steals these idols, and what you know of Laban, you know he's not gonna let this lie. He's not gonna just sit back and let this go. And so what we see is Laban rounds up a posse and says, we're gonna chase him down. And it says it took 7 days to chase him down. But they chased him down, and there was this massive confrontation between Laban and Jacob. Verse 27. This is what Laban says, why did you slip away secretly? Why did you Jacob me, right? Why did you deceive me? Why didn't you say that you wanted to leave? I would have given you a farewell feast with singing and music, accompanied by tambourines and harps. Why didn't you let me kiss my daughters and grandchildren and tell them goodbye? You have acted very foolishly. Now, I read that and I go, yeah, right. You're gonna throw a party for them? Now, I don't buy that a bit, right? And we know a little bit about Laban. We know a little bit about his character, and there's no way in the world he's gonna do this. But here's the truth. Laban's right. Laban's right. Who told Jacob to leave? It was God, right? And if God told Jacob to leave, then God was going to take care of everything that needed to be taken care of. So then why didn't Jacob just go to Laban and say, you know what, God said for me to go home. And so I'm going to take my wives, I'm going to take my kids, I'm going to take my servants, I'm going to take all the flocks, and we are going to go home. But he doesn't do that. He reverts back to his old deceitful ways. He's the trickster. And listen to what his father-in-law says to him. He says, I could destroy you. I could destroy you, but the God of your father appeared to me last night and warned me, leave Jacob alone. He's saying, I've got the power to end you right here, right now. It's just you, it's your wives, it's your kids and servants. My guys, we can end you right here, right now. But evidently what happened the night before is that God showed up. God showed up and said to Laban, hey, I know what you're up to. I know what you're after here. And guess what, man? It's not going to happen. Jacob is off limits. Do not harm a hair on his head. But he says, you know what, if I wanted to, I could take care of you right here, right now. But do you know what he's really upset about? You know what he's really upset? He's really upset about his stuff. How do I know that? Well, look at verse 43. Laban replied to Jacob, these women are my daughters. These children are my grandchildren. These flocks are my flocks. In fact, everything you see, everything you have is whose? Mine. He's like, it's mine, mine, mine. This is all my stuff. And what you basically see here is Laban recognizes something. Laban recognized that Jacob is his golden goose. I mean, he knows that Jacob has been blessed. And those blessings that Jacob has experienced, they have spilled over into his estate, into his family. But now he's about to lose that golden goose. Now he's about to lose Jacob. But listen to what Jacob says. Jacob says, I rushed away because I was afraid. Say afraid. I was afraid, Jacob answered. I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. And here's the real deal. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. He's lived with Laban for 20 years. He knows Laban's heart. He knows Laban's motives. He knows what he would typically do. And he's like, no, I know what you were going to do. You're going to take my family away from me by force. Because here's what I think Jacob is thinking. I would have done the same. I would have done the exact same thing. And so here again, you see this confrontation happening between these two people here, these two people that are wrestling in this family, this fractured family, this splintered family, this family that is in desperate need of some reconciliation here. And you see things going from bad to worse to even worse. And it's so sad here. It's so sad to watch what's happening. It's so sad to see this family devolve right before our very eyes. And it comes back down to no one's being honest here. No one's being transparent here. But the word afraid just keeps showing up time and time again. And here's what I need to share with you. When you see a word in the Bible show up multiple times, you need to pay attention to that word. Because it's in there for a reason. It's actually called the leading word. You see a word repeated multiple times within a same group of text. The author put it there for a reason. And you're going to see the word afraid show up several more times. And so what is the author leading us to? It's this, a fear index. It is what does Jacob really fear the most? And what you're seeing here is he's afraid of his father-in-law Laban. But there's somebody else in his life, guess what? That he's going to fear a little bit more than Laban. But what God is doing is allowing him to go through these trials and this testing so that he can get to a place where he will understand that he should fear God the most. And so it's really interesting as this begins to come to a head. And so he shows up in camp, and of course he's mad because someone stole his idols. And so listen to the response in verse 32. But as for your gods, see if you can find them, and let the person who has taken them die. He says, search my stuff. I may be a shady guy, and I may have some plans that I kind of play out, but I've never stolen anything from you. And little does he know that his favorite wife, Rachel, was the one who did. So he says, hey, you search, and if you find him, kill him. And so listen to what happens next, verse 34. But Rachel had taken the household idols and hidden them in her camel saddle, and now she was sitting on them. When Laban had thoroughly searched her tent without finding them, she said to her father, please, sir, forgive me if I don't get up for you. I'm having my monthly period. Now, yes, you can laugh at that, all right? I'm glad because it's meant to be a joke here. It's meant to be a little bit of a sarcastic comment, because you have to remember who is the author of this book. It is Moses. Who is the audience of this book? It is a bunch of slaves who have been enslaved in Egypt for 400 years, living under a polytheistic system of worshiping multiple gods. And so one of the things that Moses and God were always trying to teach these people is that God wants to have a relationship with you. That you don't need to go to all these multiple gods. If you need rain, go to the rain God. You need sun, go to the sun God. You need fertility, go to fertility God. God was always like, no. It's not about all those multiple gods, because you don't have to have a relationship with them. I am the one and only God. I am. And I want to have a relationship with you. And when all your needs are focused on one God, it drives home the point, I need to have a relationship with God, because God wants to have a relationship with me. And so all through Moses' writings, he's always trying to drive home this point that these gods, they're worthless. And so here in this point, it is a joke. He's like, hey, these gods can't even defeat a woman's period. That's what he's making a joke about here. Like, that's how weak they are. They are useless. But Jacob at this point finally gets pushed into a corner. He's like, enough is enough. And listen, he comes out swinging. Then Jacob became very angry, and he challenged Laban, what's my crime? He demanded, what's my crime? What have I done to make you chase me as though I were a criminal? You've rummaged through everything I own. Now show me what you found that belongs to you. Set it out here in front of all of us, before our relatives, for all to see. Let them judge between us. Man, come on. I have served you faithfully. You have done me wrong so many times. Anytime one of your animals died, I replaced it with one of mine without a charge. And I have worked, I've been faithful, I've been loyal to you, and you've changed my pay multiple times, 10 times. And you didn't give me like a salary increase. You didn't give me a cost of living increase. You gave me a decrease 10 times. I have been loyal and faithful to you. What have you done to me? I mean, he's just calling them out. In fact, he says, if God of my father had not been on my side, the God of Abraham and the fearsome God of Isaac, you would have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen your abuse and my hard work. That is why he appeared to you last night and rebuked you. God judged you, but God protected me. And so what we're going to see here is that the next couple of passages, and we're going to just skip through these, and I'm going to tell you what happens, is Laban and Jacob try to find a place of reconciliation. I mean, this whole series, we've been talking about some relationship stresses, and man, does this family have some relationship stresses. This family is at a point of fracture here at this moment, so they're trying to find a place of reconciliation. And remember, it's seeking reconciliation, not resolution. It's not about trying to be right. It's about trying to find, peace. Peace in our relationships. I've had a lot of conversations with people going, hey, what's this idea about reconciliation? Because you know what this person's done to me, what this person said about me, I don't know if I could ever be their friend again. I don't know if I could ever invite them over to my home. I don't know if I'd ever want them to be at Christmas again. I mean, I don't know if I could ever work with them again. I don't think I can be a teammate of theirs again. I don't think I can work for them again. And so this idea of reconciliation we have is that we got to put everything back to normal and everyone go along and be happy-go-lucky and just forget all the things of the past. Reconciliation isn't about that. It's about finding peace. It's about whatever peace means in that relationship and find that place of peace for both people. But I know I've learned in my life when it comes to relationships and reconciliation, that so many times that reconciliation, that peace is about what's going on in my heart. It's about what I'm wrestling with, because maybe that person that's hurt me, that person's wronged me, doesn't even know it, but yet I'm carrying it around. And so it's about finding a place of peace so both people can live at a place of peace. And so what we're gonna see here is Jacob and Laban try to broker some peace here. They try to find some reconciliation. The only way they can do it, they say this, you know what? Laban says, you go this way and I'll go this way. We're just gonna draw a line here in the sand and we're just gonna agree to disagree, all right? And you go that way, you take my daughters, you take my grandkids, you take all of my animals, you can take it all and you leave and go to your promised land, and I'm gonna go this way. But don't invite me to Christmas. I'm not gonna send the kids any cards on their birthdays. We're just gonna agree to disagree and go our separate ways. And it's a sad ending to this part of the story. A really sad ending as they get to this place of reconciliation that really doesn't heal a lot of things. But that's their way of finding a place of peace. And so as we get to the end of chapter 31, what we see is God shows up. God shows up in a big time in Jacob's fear. But what God is continuing to do is he's trying to help Jacob work through his fears, because now there's something else, there's someone else in his life that he's gonna have to deal with. Someone that he's been avoiding for 20 years. He is out of the frying pan and about ready to jump right into the fire. Because you might guess who he's going to have to face next. That's right, it's time for him to go deal with his big, hairy brother, Esau. Because you might remember 20 years ago what happened. It's what set this whole thing off. 20 years ago, he steals his brother's birthright. He steals his brother's blessing, and he's running for his life. Mom's like, get out of here. Your brother's in there sharpening his sword. He's saying, when dad dies, you're dead. And so he flees and he runs and he goes and hangs out with his uncle Laban. He's there for 20 years, but now God says, you gotta go home. I need you to come home. And here's the beautiful part of the story that we might miss, and I want to point out. In order for Jacob to come home, he's first gonna have to pass through his brother Esau's land. What a beautiful moment. And it's just a reminder for all of us. In order to come home, we must deal with the consequences of our decisions. And so here we see Jacob going to have to pass through his brother's land. And so these fears, man, he feared his father-in-law Laban, but now he's going to have someone he's going to fear even more, and that is his big brother Esau, who he's wronged. But God is working something in Jacob. God is bringing Jacob to this place of deep change because he is about to sweetly and gently break the Jacob in Jacob. So chapter 32, let's jump in. It says this, verse 1, as Jacob started on his way again, angels of God came to meet him. And when Jacob saw them, he exclaimed, this is God's camp. So he named the place Mandarin. Now you remember 20 years prior to this, 20 years, he was on the run again. He was 20 years ago, he showed up in this exact same place with not a penny to his name. He found a rock for a pillow. He went to sleep. God showed up. He had this vision of a stairway to heaven, and God affirmed this covenant that he made with his grandfather and with his father, with him. God showed up here in this place, and here he is again. But God is not on Jacob's mind. Who's on Jacob's mind? His brother Esau. And so listen to what happens in verse 3. It says, then Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esau, who was living in the region of Seir, which actually means hairy. So remember what Esau's name means? Hairy. So I find it really humorous. I don't know which one happened first. You know, did he move there and they named the town Harry because everyone was hairy from his family? I don't know, but Harry lives in Harry. That's all we know right here. He told them, give this message to my master Esau. Humble greetings from your servant Jacob. Until now, I've been living with Uncle Laban, and now I own cattle, donkeys, flocks of sheep, and goats, and many servants, both men and women. I have sent these messengers to inform my Lord of my coming, hoping that you will be friendly to me. And so instead of going out to meet his brother, man to man, he sends a servant. And he sends a servant to say this, guess what? Your brother, he is loaded. He is filthy rich. And so basically what we have Jacob doing here is like, I'm sending you a blank check. And what I want you to do is I've already signed the check. I've left the amount empty. You write in whatever amount it's going to take for us to get past this, and we'll just go on our separate ways. I mean, he's trying to bribe him here. He's trying to buy his forgiveness. Verse 6, it continues, after delivering the message, the messengers returned to Jacob and reported, we met your brother. We met Esau, and he is already on his way to meet you. And then there's a pregnant pause, and then he says, with an army of 400 men. And in Hebrew, it says Jacob wet his pants. That's what it says here. No, it doesn't say that, but I guarantee you did. He's going, what, an army? Are you kidding me? I got my wives and kids and servants and a bunch of goats and sheep. Man, I'm a sitting duck. I'm a dead man. I mean, if my brother is in the same place he was 20 years ago, I don't stand a chance. And so look at Jacob's response, and Jacob's just being Jacob all the way to the end. Verse 7, Jacob was terrified. There it is again. He's terrified at the news, so he divided his household along with the flocks and herds and camels into two groups. Say two. He thought, if Esau meets one group and attacks it, perhaps the other group can escape. I mean, this is so Jacob, isn't it? I mean, here he is going, hey, I gotta get out of this, and the only way I'm gonna get out of this is I'm about to make some sacrifices. So let me divide my house up into two groups. And you know how he's gonna do this, right? Because you know he's got a favorite wife and a wife he got stuck with, right? And so he takes Leah and her kids and her servants like, hey, this is group number one. And then he's got Rachel and her kids and her servants like, you're group number two. And guess which group he's going to send out first? Yeah, that's right. He's like, hey, Leah, you're going first. Because if he attacks you, then maybe Rachel and her kids can escape. And guess what? I'm way here in the back and I'm good no matter what. But I need to create a little bit of a diversion. I mean, Jacob, like, come on. I mean, this guy is all the way to the end just being a Jacob. But here's where he's at. He's at this place now, he's between a rock and his brother Esau. He knows there's nowhere else he can turn. He can't hide from this any longer. He's going to have to face this one way or another. So what we see here is that Jacob is finally at the end of his rope. You see, when there's nowhere to turn, where do we turn? We turn to God. When there's nowhere to turn, we turn to God. And most of us, many of us, have been at that place. We've been at the end of the rope, the end of ourselves, and we've had nowhere else to turn but to turn to God. And God meets us in that place. Now, I often wonder, like any parent would wonder with your kids, like, wouldn't he prefer that we turn to him a little bit sooner? Wouldn't he prefer that we come to him? I think, why don't we come to God sooner? Do we think, well, I got this. I can handle this. I made this problem. I'll fix it myself, or this isn't that big of a deal. And so I'm not going to bother God with this one. This is trivial. It's small. He's got bigger things to worry about. He's got wars and pandemics and elections and football seasons. He's got other things that are far more important than my little trivial problem. Or maybe we think, you know what? I made this mess. I need to clean it up. You know, God's not going to help me. God's going to say, hey, you did this. You go clean your room. You do what you need to take care of what you've done over here. And so many times we just think that I'm not going to come to God until it's finally all we have to hold on to. But God meets us in that place. When we get to the end of ourselves, we get to the end of our rope, God is there waiting for us. And so now here we have Jacob. He's at the end of his rope, and he prays this beautiful prayer. It's actually the longest prayer in the book of Genesis. Verse 9 says this: Jacob prayed, O God of my grandfather Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, you told me to do this. You said, return to your own land and take your relatives. And you promised me I will treat you kindly. I'm not worthy of the unfailing love and faithfulness that you have shown to me, your servant. When I left home and crossed the Jordan River, I owned nothing except a walking stick. And now my household fills 2 large camps. Oh Lord, please rescue me from the hand of my brother Esau. I am afraid. There's that word again. I am afraid that he is coming to attack me along with my wives and children. But you promised me I will surely treat you kindly, and I will multiply your descendants until they become as numerous as the sands along the seashore, too many to count. God, I'm so afraid. God, I know it's all coming to roost. I know I'm about to have to deal with my brother. And so here he is coming to God one more time, rubbing the proverbial lamp, saying, hey, God, would you pop out of here? Would you pop up in this moment? I need you now. Would you grant my wish? And so he does. He prays this beautiful, beautiful prayer. But his words and his actions, not there yet. Because listen to what he does. He tries to bribe his brother some more. Listen to what all he bribes him with. Verse 14, 15 kind of point out the bribe: 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. He sends everything from the farm except Old McDonald. Everything is going now. And I love the picture that the Bible paints here, because it's almost this image, and I see Esau and his 400 warriors, and they're kind of walking on their way to see them. And so Jacob sends them like a parade. And so they're walking, and next thing you know, they see the camels. Oh, look at those camels. You know, the next thing oh, look at all those sheep. Oh, look at all those donkeys. You know, oh, look at all those ewes. I mean, he just sees them one after another, and he's not trying here to give a gift to his brother. He is clearly trying to bribe his brother. And so listen to what it says in verse 20. This is Jacob's thoughts. I will try to appease. Say appease. I will try to appease him by sending gifts ahead of me. And when I see him in person, he will be friendly. Perhaps he'll be friendly to me. I'm going to make amends. I'm going to make a payment, because Jacob recognizes something. He's wrong. He's wrong. You know, with his father-in-law Laban, he knows he was in the right and Laban was in the wrong. So God showed up and God delivered justice for him. But in this situation, he knows he's the one who's wrong. He's the one who's made the mistake and messed up. But instead of appealing to God, he's trying to appeal to his brother by trying to buy forgiveness. And so it says this in verse 22. During the night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 servant wives, his 11 sons, and crossed the Jabbok River with them. And after taking them to the other side, he sent over all of his possessions, and he leaves them there, and he goes back across the river. I mean, what a Jacob plan, right? I mean, what a Jacob plan. I mean, this is why I have such a hard time with this guy. If his brother is anywhere near the same headspace he was 20 years ago, he is sending his wife and kids like lambs to the slaughter. So Jacob's like, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna send them because I'm more worried about my own rear end than I am them. Listen, men, dads, fathers, no matter how afraid we ever get, we have to always protect our families. And Jacob just punts on this. Jacob's like, no, it's all about me. It's all about me. And so in verse 24, what we see is God finally has Jacob exactly where he wants him. You know where that is? Alone. All by himself. Just like he was 20 years prior. When God showed up that one night where he had nothing. His head was laying on a rock as a pillow, and God showed up and made an agreement with him. They had this if-then conversation. He said, I'm gonna make you some promises. And I'm gonna keep my promise to you, Jacob. And here's Jacob in this moment. And literally over the last couple of verses, you've seen all that Jacob has accumulated. You see his wives, and you see his kids, and you see his servants, and you see all these animals you have. You see the wealth that he's accumulated. God's like, man, I kept my word to you. Jacob, I kept my promise to you. Look at all that you have. But have you kept your promise to me? You see, in this moment here, God is trying to teach him a lesson about fear, which always brings up the point. People always ask me, Pastor, should we be afraid of God? To which I always say, absolutely we should. And not in the sense that we need to hide in the corner and cower because we make mistakes, because we sin, we mess up, or not that we're gonna go hide in the woods like we see that Adam and Eve did because they didn't want God to see them. No, and not in that sense. But we should be afraid of God. We should fear God because he is holy, because he is righteous. It's a sense of reverence. It's a sense of holiness. It's a sense of wonder in awe. It's understanding who God is. It's understanding his position. It's understanding that he is the creator. It's understanding his power. It's understanding his compassion. It's understanding his plan of salvation. It's understanding his position, who he is, and where we fit. And saying, God, you know what? I recognize I need to humble myself. I need to surrender. I need to put myself under you. It's that kind of fear. And so here we see God bringing Jacob to this point of, hey, I need you to fear me more than Laban. I need you to fear me more than your brother Esau. And not because he's like, hey, I'm gonna punish you, but he's like, no, I love you enough to bring you to this place of breaking. I need to get rid of the Jacob in you. And the only way I'm going to be able to do this is to allow you to do this, to strip away everything that you've used all your life, Jacob, to kind of weasel out of all these situations. I need to strip all that away from you and let you deal clearly with the consequences. So verse 24 says, this left Jacob all alone in the camp. And a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn began to break. Now that one passage could be like 10 sermons right there. Because like people go, well, who was the man he's wrestling with? I mean, that's a great debate. And I don't have time to unpack that today. There's several different beliefs on this, but most Bible scholars, and I tend to agree with them, that this is the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ that he's wrestling with. Now here in this moment, Jesus shows up and he's having this wrestling match with Jacob, but it's dark. And so Jacob can't see who he's wrestling with. All he knows is that he is wrestling for his very life. And look how things go in verse 25. When the man saw that he could not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of its socket. Then the man said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Say, bless me. So these two are wrestling all night long. They're having this incredible wrestling match. And obviously the person he's wrestling with has an incredible amount of power because the Bible says with his finger, he touches the hip socket of Jacob and immediately is wrenched out of socket, leaving Jacob helpless. Helpless. If you're in a wrestling match and you have no ability to put any weight on your hip, you are helpless. And so all Jacob has the ability to do, all Jacob can do in this moment is just hold on. Is just hold on for dear life. And maybe you've been in that place in life before. Maybe you've been in that place in life, that moment of breaking, that moment of surrender. Maybe you've been in a place where what life was happening was like a vice. And you just feel the pressure just kind of coming in and coming in and coming in, where you find yourself at the end of yourself. You find yourself at the end of yourself spiritually. You find yourself at the end of yourself physically. And you know at this moment that you're no longer in control. You think you have been, but you're not. And everything you've tried in the past, everything you've done in the past, whatever's worked in the past to get out of these situations, it no longer works. And you come to God and say, God, do you see this? I'm helpless. God, why have you taken everything away from me? And you feel in that moment absolutely helpless. I'll never forget when Eli was 1 year old, he got bronchitis. And I had to take him to the doctor, and we took him to the doctor, and the doctor got the little stethoscope and listened to his lungs and said, I need to get some x-rays. And then he said these words, Dad, you get Eli and bring him with me. Mom, you stay here. Which I was confused because usually it's the other way around, right? But I found out why in just a few moments. See, he walked me back into this x-ray room, and there was this big x-ray machine in this table, and on this table was like this plastic shell thing. He said, here's what I need you to do. I need you to take his clothes off except down to his diaper, and then I need you to put him in the shell. And around that shell were these strips of Velcro. He said, I need you to take Eli, put him in there, wrap this up with only his little head sticking out, and then I need you to take those Velcro straps, and I need you to wrap it around and make it as tight as possible. So he has no ability to move his hands, no ability to move his legs. He cannot wiggle at all. He is laying there absolutely helpless so we can get a good x-ray. I'll never forget that moment as a dad going, oh boy, he's gonna need therapy for this one, all right. Thank goodness he was one, And so I started taking him his clothes off and getting him ready, and I took him and I placed him in this little shell thing, and I closed it around his little bitty body. And then I took these two straps of Velcro, and in that moment, it's like, oh, this is gonna be so hard. And I took it and I wrapped it around him as tight as I could, and wrapped the second one around him as tight as I could. And the whole time, Eli is just locked onto me in my eyes. And as a dad, I'm sitting here going, man, I promise you this won't last long. You're not gonna remember this. Thank goodness, it's gonna be over soon. And then the doctor said, I need you to step away. And at that moment, I was like, I don't know if I can step away. And here he is just locked onto me. He's just looking at me in this moment. And I had to step away. I'll never forget his gaze, just looking at me as dad. And looking at me going, Dad, I'm helpless. I can't move, I can't do anything. I'm helpless. And maybe that's where some of you are right now. Maybe spiritually you feel that way. Maybe it's physically you feel that way. It's your marriage. your kids, your finances, your career, maybe it's your health, maybe it's some circumstances or some sin in your life. But you find yourself in this place of helplessness and you're crying out to God and like, God, I got nothing. God, I got nothing. I can't do anything else. And it's that moment, I think, that God has Jacob in, where he's like, Jacob, how's that working for you? Jacob, what are you gonna do now? How are you gonna get yourself, how are you gonna fix this problem? Are you going to finally trust me now and allow me to do what I want to sweetly and gently and compassionately and lovingly do for you? And so we see in this moment, Jacob has everything stripped away. He's in this place of helplessness. And this man touches his hip, and Jacob will never be the same, because in this moment, one touch removes the Jacob from Jacob. And Jacob will walk the rest of his life with a limp. Man, it's intense, isn't it? But here's what God does. God allows circumstances, God allows our sin, because he knows that sometimes that's the only way he's gonna get us to this place of brokenness, this place of surrender, this place of humility. He says, I'm gonna allow the circumstances in your life because you know what? You're not gonna learn this reading a book. You're gonna have to experience this. You're gonna have to go to the learning lab to figure this one out. Or he says, you know what? I'm just gonna let your sin be what it is. And I'm gonna deal with it. I'm not gonna tell you when, I'm not gonna put it on the calendar, but we're gonna deal with this issue in your life. He uses circumstances, he uses sin. And that's what he's done in Jacob's life. And he's brought him to this point of brokenness because deep change is happening. And so here is Jacob, and what is he doing? He's just clinging on to God. He's holding on to Jesus. It's the only thing he knows to do in this moment. He's got no ability, no strength left. He's just holding on. Verse 27, what is your name? What is your name, the man asked, and he replied, Jacob. Now, do you think Jesus didn't know his name? You think Jesus was like, who are you? I mean, are you Abraham? Which one are you? And like, no, he knows his name. And so when he asked him his name and he says Jacob, there was something else going on here. He said, my name is Jacob. Yeah, I'm the trickster. I'm the deception guy. I'm the heel grabber. I'm the guy always working a con. I'm the guy who's always been about me. You see, in this moment, saying his name was a confession. That's my name. That's who I've been. That's what I've done. And I love what Jesus does next. He says, not anymore. Not anymore. Jesus says, your name will no longer be Jacob. The man told him, from now on, you will be called Israel. Say Israel. Because you have fought with God and with men, and you have won. Israel means to conquer. El means God. You have wrestled, you have fought with God, and you won. And you're no longer who you used to be. You're no longer that Jacob. You are now Israel, and you're gonna limp out of this moment a changed man, and not by your own strength and not by your own power, but by mine. And Jacob's like, please tell me, who are you? Who are you? Why do you want to know, the man said. Well, I think Jacob figures out who it is, because listen to the very next verse. Jacob named the place Peniel, which means face of God. For he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been spared. The sun was rising as Jacob left Peniel, and he was limping because of the injury to his hip. You know, I don't think Jacob ever forgot that moment. I don't think he ever forgot that night, that wrestling match with Jesus, where he met him face to face. And he led Jacob through this process of transformation, breaking him, blessing him, and changing his name. I mean, what a beautiful picture. What a beautiful picture of who our God is and what he does for each and every one of us. And so maybe you're here today, and maybe you're in one of those moments right now, and maybe you're resisting. Maybe like Jacob, you're trying all the ways it's always worked for you to get out of it because you don't want to submit. So I'm just encouraging you today. Maybe God brought you here today for a face-to-face encounter with him. A face-to-face encounter with him. Because when you meet Jesus face-to-face, your life will never, ever be the same. Church, would you pray with me? Jesus, we come to you in this moment with hearts filled with gratitude and thankfulness for this incredible, incredible text, reading your word about this guy Jacob and the life that he lived. And his life was a mess. His family was a mess. Yet God, you saw something in him that you compassionately and patiently were going to allow life to work its way forward so that he can become exactly who you created him to be. And so I pray for us. I pray for us in this moment that we will just quietly say to you, Jesus, I give you permission. I give you permission in my life to do whatever you must do, to bring me to the place where I know the only thing I have to hold on to is you, Jesus. Jesus, whatever it takes, whatever you need to do, whatever you have to break in me, I give you permission because I want to be blessed and I want a new name. I want to be known as the son, daughter of the King. Jesus, we love you. Thank you for sweetly and gently breaking us. It's in your name we pray.